Disclosure. CPI, or the Cryptid Paranormal Investigators, is a story drawing inspiration from a wide variety of internet urban legends, scary stories, and strange mythos. These stories are often referred to as creepypastas, a term that derives from the word copypasta. The story takes several characters from these tales and reanimates them into a new world, giving them an overarching backstory and connections to each other. These characters can be easily identified, but due to some of their stories not being under Creative Commons copyright, we have chosen to change a few identities. Our goal is not to infringe upon any other stories, but to bring joy to the listeners, as these stories once did for us. Please enjoy Morgan Morales.
Good evening, listener. I want to welcome you to tonight's program. Now, usually on this station, we talk about unsolved mysteries, or the conspiracies of the unknown. But tonight, I want to share a new tale with the audience. One that might branch out over several weeks, months, or even years. Now be warned, some events in this story can be considered disturbing, for it involves the mutilation of small children and animals, and constant mention of murder. This story is not for the faint of heart, so if you're still listening after this point, you've been warned. Now that everyone else is gone, I have a series of questions to ask you, my dear friend. Is it okay if I call you friend? Good. So, are you driving right now? If so, you should check your back seat for any unwanted passengers. Also, don't look into those woods you're passing, because something's watching. And that person driving behind you might just be following you home. So make your next moves wisely. Focus on the road ahead, because it might be pouring rain, and something just might be waiting up ahead. My friend, if you're at home, then lock your doors and windows. Close your curtains, because that man down the street is watching your every move. Check under your bed, because that might not be your dog. Make sure your parents are on their way home, and for your better judgment, make sure you are alone. Why am I telling you this? Because perhaps if the victim in our story took these precautions, then just maybe his life would have turned out a little different than it did that night. Our story begins in Pennsylvania, where our protagonist is sound asleep. Well, maybe not. He would appear to be having a slight nightmare.
That's right, Zeke. Sleep. Just like your family did.
Zeke woke up with a cold sweat, trembling from the night terrors. He gazed across his room to gather a sense of his surroundings. He looked at his pale blue walls illuminated by the moonlight, gleaming through the bedroom windows. The window was slightly cracked, allowing air to leak through, making the hardwood floors frigid. Zeke's bed was elevated slightly off the floor, just enough that his small dog could crawl his way under to sleep.
Joey? Are you there, boy?
Zeke called for his dog for comfort, but there was no response. He called a few more times, and still nothing. He was still discombobulated from the nightmare, so he thought maybe water on his face can pull him out of it. He slowly stepped one foot onto the floor, in fear of waking his family members. Zeke lived with his mother and father, along with 2 older brothers and a little sister. He wasn't a problematic child. He kept his grades good, his room clean, and he even did his chores properly. Zeke made his way down a long yellow hall, dimly lit by a wax warmer that was left on most likely by his mom. For a moment, he heard creaking behind him, as if someone or something was approaching.
Hello? Joey? Mom? Dad?
He quickly dismissed it as his mind playing tricks on him. Zeke approached the bathroom door, which was located on the right side of the hall, in front of 2 doors that led to his siblings' rooms. He opened the old white door with the chip painting and quickly turned on the lights. It was a small bathroom, maybe 8 by 8, just enough for a sink, toilet, and bathtub. Once he entered the room, he could hear a dripping sound. Although therapeutic at the time, it would soon become rather annoying. Zeke looked into the mirror and began collecting his thoughts. He looked at his tamed curly hair, his soft brown eyes that had never seen the terrors of the world. He was only 14 at the time. Zeke turned on the faucet of the sink and splashed water on his face repeatedly, trying to wake himself up. The mirror caught a small glimpse of the hallway. While Zeke dried the water off his face, out of the corner of his eye he got a figure running down the corridor.
Who's there? Michael, is that you?
Zeke was fed up with the foolishness. He quickly turned off the sink faucet and the bathroom light, leaving the shower dripping. He walked outwards into the halls and moved quickly, determined to catch his brothers trying to pester him. He was so focused on that, he didn't notice the bedroom doors behind him creak open. Zeke rushed downstairs into another hall and followed the sounds into his kitchen. He looked at a messy dining table. There was a mess left there from the takeout Chinese he had shared with his family. He noticed something strange in the kitchen. The back door was open, and so were all the windows. Come to think of it, all of the windows were open in the house, which was weird. His dad had a rule about open windows during the nighttime. Zeke quickly rushed to lock the back door, which was next to the end of the dining table, which was set in the frameway of his family room. He heard laughter this time. It felt as if it was right behind him. He slowly turned around, shaking in his skin, and looked into the family room. He froze in place. His soul was shaken. In the center of the family room on the rug, in a circle, were 5 bodies. In the middle, holding a knife, was a deranged-looking figure. His eyes weren't visible, but the devilish grin was. It was pale, with long black hair. It began to cackle and speak to Zeke.
Shh. It'll be our little secret.
Zeke screamed for his life, and in a bright flash, the creature disappeared, leaving the knife lodged in his father's chest. Zeke quickly ran to his father and pulled the blade from his bleeding torso.
Dad, no. Please, it's gonna be okay. Please, please, please be okay. Please. Please.
The police would arrive moments after, finding Zeke holding his family's lifeless bodies, sobbing and covered in their blood. The crime scene was filled with officer after officer, the fire department, and the paramedics. Zeke sat at the base of the stairs, wrapped in a wool blanket.
So, then this thing just disappeared.
Yes, sir. He's gonna come back for me. I just want my mom and dad back. Did you find my dog?
The officer hesitated and glanced up at his partner.
Zeke, your dog was found tied to the shower head in the bathroom. His throat was cut open and he was bleeding out.
Zeke said nothing, his face drained of color and hope. His entire family was gone. He was in danger and he knew the officers didn't believe him. The 2 cops slowly stepped away to talk to the sheriff, monitoring everyone and handling the crime scene.
And be sure to get a picture of that there on the wall.
Sir, what's the news?
Well, I think we all know what's going on here, don't we?
To me, it looks like the little guy's off his meds.
That's not the case at all, rookie. We're dealing with a sinister being. That boy is in serious danger.
You're for sure it's him, sir.
Wouldn't doubt it one bit. The writing on the wall says it all. Quite literally.
What exactly are we dealing with then?
His name was once Woodrow Jefferson. Murdered his whole family way back in the 80s. He then went on a spree. He was then captured by the FBI, only to escape and never be caught again.
Man, there's no way some boy escaped and wasn't caught. Especially if he was a teenager.
Well, that's the thing. He was always very different. Some believe he's some sort of supernatural being.
You guys are crazy. I never should have taken the transfer to this unit.
Believe what we're saying or don't. Either way, that boy is in danger. What do you think, Sheriff White? Do we have enough for a smoking gun?
Let's see. The boy's covered in his family's blood and his prints are on the knife, with no surviving witnesses. I think we got plenty. We definitely could get the insanity plea. He'd be a lot safer that way.
So, are we ready for the arrest?
That night, the police apprehended young Zeke Batson, where he would, later that week, start his trial. The process was only 3 months, but the Batson family murder was everywhere. People were conducting their own conspiracies of who could have possibly done this or the motive behind the boy killing his whole family. Most people looked at the boy as a monster. Some religious groups used his name as a scare tactic and proof of the world coming to an end. Some people held riots outside the courthouse, demanding they free the boy for his innocence. Unfortunately, no matter what the public's opinion, Zeke Batson was sentenced to spend the remainder of his life in the Brook Hollow Psychiatric Hospital located in Portland, Maine. We interrupt this regularly scheduled program to bring you a word from our sponsor.
Hiya, kids! Mr. Bear here. Say, what are you doing at home watching TV? Why not come on down to Mr. Bear's Pizza and Prizes? Come play with your friends, win totally cool prizes, eat all the pizza you want, and meet the incredible Mr. Bear and friends. So grab your friends and family and come on down to Mr. Bear's Pizza, place where every kid can have fun.
7 years have passed since his conviction. He now sits alone in his mind, in a cold room with a small window, where he ponders the rest of his life away. And that is until today, where he will meet the woman who will change his life. And down the hall struts Francesca Verma, future psychiatrist and distinguished honor grad from Stanford University. Young Franny wore her hair in a tight bun, with a brown button-down shirt. She wore her favorite wine-colored skirt, and tied the look all together with her high-dollar frames. With a clipboard in her hand, young Franny made her way to the office of the well-rounded Dr. Monica Piela.
So, let's see. Francesca Verma, born and raised in Twin Hills, Idaho. Majored in psychology and graduated top of her class. You even finished school a year early. I can't say I'm not impressed. That's a lot of success for a 23-year-old woman.
Why, thank you. I can't take all the credit. Most of it were my parents.
I'm going to stop you right there, Miss Verma. Don't belittle your success story to try to be humble. I grew up in squalor, with an abusive father and a family who doubted I would ever be anything more than some woman laid up with dozens of kids while a man worked and told me how to live. I climbed from those pits and got my education. Then faced sexism in school and even this building we sit in. Now look at me, right where I wanted to be. Francesca, I've read your story and I know you had a very interesting childhood. You did just as I did. You climbed from your shame. You owe that credit to no one but yourself. Not your parents, professors, or colleagues. Just Francesca.
That means a lot that you say that, Dr. Piela.
It's not a problem. So, besides what I already know, tell me more about Francesca Verma.
I faced adversity through my early childhood. Normal things mostly. Racism, sexism, and of course the overwhelming pressure of my parents.
Such unfortunate circumstances, my dear friend. Now enough about us. Let's get into the terms of your internship so I can give you a tour.
Franny smiled politely and continued her evaluation with Dr. Piela. The two then began a tour through the cold, echoing blue halls of Brook Hollow. They made their way up several staircases until they reached floor 3, block 17. This was the children's unit, where the strangest cases were kept for safety purposes. This also happened to be where Zeke was kept.
Now, Verma, this is the block where we keep Mr. Batson. He might come off as intimidating at first, but he's harmless. He is also the only patient in this block under my care, so please ignore the others. They should be in the day room anyway. Zeke, on the other hand, keeps to himself and tends to stay in his room.
The doctor opened the block door with her key badge. Behind the door was a long corridor with a big open space at the end. That was the day room. The rooms were different on this floor. They were more like cells, with a glass front for a door and walls. They were almost like zoo exhibits. The two slowly made their way down the hall to greet the patients. To Franny's surprise, they were all children.
They're all kids?
That is correct. This is the ward for young children who have experienced severe trauma, physically and mentally. I don't work with children anymore, which is why I only have one patient on the unit.
Well, doctor, if my math is correct, Mr. Batson should be at least 22, far older than all these children. I assume this would be a unit for the most dangerous patients, which would also explain the glass cages.
Franny, you are mistaken. The glass is to monitor the children easier. They're a bigger liability compared to our adults. Now, Zeke is also a different story. Perhaps it is time for you to meet him.
That would probably clear my mind.
Franny was filled with unease. She noticed the questionable ideas of the facility and began questioning her life choices as well. The two made their way back down the hall to a room in the middle. A man sat in the center, hunched over his own body, thinking. Franny ran her hands across the plexiglass into the carved holes designed for air. She could see the boy's pain. Dr. Piela swiped her badge across the monitor, allowing the door to push open. The two slowly stepped into the clean, depressing cell.
Zeke, you have a visitor today.
Go away, visitor.
Now, Zeke, let's not be rude. Miss Verma came all this way to meet you. The least you can do is turn around and say hello.
I told you I didn't want to meet her.
Zeke, I know you're upset with me, but she's going to take very good care of you.
Is she even a doctor?
Dr. Piela looked at Franny to intervene.
Well, not yet, Mr. Batson. I'm only interning here while I work towards that. My goal is to hopefully take over for Dr. Piela one day, so she can retire. Of course, take over is different than replacing her, and I could never do that.
You see, Zeke? We still have plenty of time together.
A few years is nothing compared to the rest of my life here.
A few years can make a big difference, young man. Now, let's stop the passive-aggressive attitude and show our new friend here some manners.
Zeke slowly unraveled himself from his position and stood up on his feet. He turned around hesitantly, as if 1,000 tons were weighing him down. When he finally pivoted his face, it revealed great sorrow. His curly hair fell into his face and covered his emotionally damaged eyes. He slowly held out his hand to greet Franny.
It's nice to meet you, Mr. Batson. I'm Francesca Verma.
Mr. Batson was my father. Call me Zeke.
Well then, Zeke, it's a pleasure to meet you officially.
Likewise.
Zeke turned back around and resumed his defensive position.
Why don't we leave the demon to his demons, Miss Verma? We do have plenty of paperwork ready to be signed back in my office.
That sounds splendid, actually. Let's go take care of that.
Dr. Piela and Franny made their way out of the cage, leaving Zeke to his thoughts. Before they walked away, Franny took one last look back. She could feel his pain. She desired nothing more than to help him, but how could she do that? The two exited the ward and made their way to the office to sign papers.
Now, all that's left to do is sign these papers.
Before we start my packet, can you sign this paper really quick? It's for validation for my classes.
Of course.
Francesca handed over a paper to Dr. Piela, which she signed while reading through the packet for Franny's internship.
Thank you, Dr. Piela. You're such a great help.
They finished their meeting hours later. The two ladies met up in the parking lot that was lit by the orange glow of streetlights. Dr. Piela walked Franny to her gold-colored car, where they said their goodbyes.
Remember, 8 a.m. sharp.
Yes, ma'am.
Dr. Piela walked off in the direction of her own car, while Francesca jumbled with her keys to unlock the door, until she heard something in the woods in front of her, causing her to drop them.
You can't run.
Franny quickly scrambled around on the ground for her car keys. She swiped her hand under her tire and found them. She quickly stood up and unlocked the door and climbed into her car, where she felt safe. She turned on the overhead light and looked at herself in the mirror.
You're just going crazy from too much stress.
Franny put the keys in the ignition and started up the Buick. She glanced down at a file she kept on the passenger floorboard that read Batson, Ezekiel. She resumed her departure and calmly left the facility parking lot, where she would journey to her lonely apartment complex. She arrived home 30 minutes later. She walked into a pitch-black apartment and turned the lights on. There was nothing in the living room, no furniture, pets, or even trash, just two normal-sized cardboard boxes. She dragged herself to her depressing bedroom that only had a bed and Francesca's clothes in a small closet. She undressed and made her way to the bathroom, where she would shower, brush her teeth, and then return to bed. Once in bed, she glanced at her phone for a moment. There were no notifications, not even a text from her parents. She sighed and set her alarm, then rolled over to sleep. Franny began to dream something strange.
Guys, are you ready?
Should we really be doing this?
Come on, Fran. It's probably fake like you said.
I don't know. Maybe she's right. Oh, great. Now they're both scared.
I'm not scared of anything.
Then let's get going.
The following day, Franny began her official first day. She arrived at work an hour early, made coffee for her and Dr. Piela. She went about her checklist and tended to those duties. She noticed on the list that she was required to lead group therapy with the younger patients, which she found strange. But Dr. Piela mentioned not working with children. Perhaps it was a test. Franny questioned nothing and pushed through. She guided herself through the labyrinth of a hospital, greeting guards, patients, and doctors. Her last goal before lunch was doing the children's group, but if she was going to do it right, she wanted to make sure everyone attended. That meant getting Zeke to leave his room. She approached his cell of a room where he sat reading a book of some kind, while facing the wall.
Zeke, excuse me, it's me, Franny. I was hoping you could join us for our group today. It would really make my first day memorable.
I don't do groups. Not with those kids.
Why not? They all seem like lovely boys and girls. I'm sure they're not mean.
That's what you think. When I go out there, they all stare at me.
Zeke, just because you're a little different doesn't mean that they hate you.
I'm older than all of them. They all know it. I don't understand why they keep me in this unit. I'm an adult now, but no one treats me like it.
I can understand why that's a little frustrating. Perhaps if you talk to Dr. Piela.
I've tried. She says no every time.
I could always put a word in for my friend.
Zeke quickly turned around enraged.
We're not friends. Get out of my room.
Franny stumbled backwards. She was a little unnerved by his reaction. She found it strange that such a small word set him off. Franny brushed off the confrontation and continued to her last group for the day. That afternoon, during her break, she sat upset, wondering what she could do differently. The guards noticed, and they gave her their 2 cents.
Hey, Franny. Job already got you now?
Only a little, guys. But I'm fine.
Who's the perpetrator? Dr. Piela? She can be a real pain sometimes.
No. Of course not. It's just a patient.
Is it Betty Batson?
His name is Zeke, but yes, actually.
Look, newbie. It took years for Dr. P to break through with that kid. You just gotta give him time.
I don't have years.
Aren't you taking Piela's place in a few years?
Need I remind all of you, this is an internship. I will only be here for a year, then I return when I get my degree, which is probably going to be another 7 years.
Yeah, girls got girls.
At least she's got something going for her. You're living with your mom and you're 27.
Hey, I pay rent.
Anyway, don't stress too much, kid. What I would do is offer him an incentive. Like candy. Kids love candy.
Yeah, and when you're done giving him candy, you can stick him in your van.
Oh, will you shut up?
An incentive? I never thought of that.
Franny began brainstorming, thinking of ways to connect with the boy and to get him out of his room. And the next day, before her group with the children, Franny chose to leave that little incentive with Zeke. She left him a piece of gum. If it was gone by the time she walked back, then perhaps she can get through to him. To her surprise, it worked. She planted the perfect seed for them. From then on, Franny built a routine. Every day she would do the same thing. Coffee for the guards, paperwork, and group with the children. Each time before, she would leave a different piece of gum, and every time he would take it. This routine went on for about a month. She knew at this point it was time to engage with him. Today was a special day for her too. Dr. Piela and the main faculty were out in training, meaning it was up to Franny to prove herself and keep everything in tip-top shape. And she did just that. With her last stop of the day being a one-on-one with Zeke, she was ecstatic. Though when she approached his room, she noticed something strange. Not only was he standing up walking around, but his walls were decorated with several news articles and strange drawings, including pictures of his family. Franny approached with caution and tapped on the glass with a pen.
Hello, Mr. Zeke. Are you ready for a one-on-one?
Look at it. I think I've almost figured it out.
And what might that be?
I know what killed my family.
Oh. Well, that sure is interesting. Maybe you should tell Dr.
No! I've tried. She won't listen. She'll just up my medication and then take all my work away. But you'll listen, won't you? We're friends, right?
Of course. Why don't you give me a walkthrough of what you have? Maybe even explain how you got all of this.
Explanation is easy. I used to be allowed to use the library here and have pen pals. They helped me collect tons of things from the case. Some were even stolen photos of evidence. You'd be surprised how crazy people can be about an alleged murderer. I even racked up donations from him.
That's fun.
Alright, so here's the story. Back in the 80s in Philadelphia, a kid at the age of 13 murdered his whole family. His name was Woodrow Jefferson, or Woody for short. This kid went on a killing spree, killing family after family. He was later caught by the FBI.
Well, if he was apprehended in the 80s, wouldn't he be in prison?
That's what everyone else would think, right? Well, the truth is, he never stood trial for his crimes.
How is that possible?
Because he disappeared out of thin air the night before.
Zeke, let's be reasonable.
I was also convinced until I took into consideration supernatural possibilities. Then I came across stories about someone the media called the Attendant, as well as a bunch of other names.
Franny became uncomfortable with the topic.
With him, it all fits together. I obtained this strange book a few years ago, and it spoke of things called proxies and overlords. If I used the way the Attendant and proxies work, then it would explain how Woody snapped, and how he escaped custody. Moments before he disappeared, all of the cameras glitched out, which is one of the many signs of the Attendant.
Zeke, with all due respect, you sound like a madman. There's no such thing as proxies and this so-called attendant, and even if they exist, how does this convict this Woodrow kid?
When the police investigated his family murder, they found in journals talks of a faceless man who visited him, a man who kept offering him gifts.
What kind of gifts?
The gift of immortality, and the ability to kill anyone and anything. I know this attendant guy and Woody are related. They have to be. I mean, think about it. With him, he got everything he ever wanted.
Franny's eyes became empty as she spaced out into a memory.
Anything you ever wanted.
Anything you ever wanted.
Anything you ever wanted.
Anything you want. 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 Anything you want.
Anything I want.
Francesca snapped out of her trance, with tears running down her face.
Franny, are you okay?
Zeke, there's something I should share with you.
I'm listening.
The attendant is real. I've seen him.
Wait, really?
I had a very unfortunate childhood because of it.
Zeke had a sudden realization about the woman.
I knew your name sounded super familiar to me when you introduced yourself. The Tattletale abductions. The girl who went into the woods with her friends and came out alone. You claimed to have seen a faceless creature that took your friends, but everyone thinks you killed them. Or at least had something to do with it.
That is correct, Ezekiel. I take it my story is on that research?
Only fragments. I'd love to hear the whole thing.
Perhaps some other time. Back to your case. If the attendant was visiting Woody, what exactly does it mean?
He pushed him to murder. Once Woody killed, he never stopped. I think our answers all lie in the attendant.
I'm still not getting what you're saying.
The attendant controlled Woody. Woody killed my family, which means I'm innocent.
So you expect the authorities to find a supernatural being and bring him in to testify on your behalf?
No, I want us to find him and bring him in.
There are two reasons why that's not possible. One, you're locked up. Two, if the FBI couldn't find and catch that thing, what makes you think we can?
Answer to the last question, we have something the FBI didn't.
And what's that?
The Cryptid Compendium. Or at least that's what I call it.
The what?
Zeke ran to the corner of his room where his bed was and pulled out from under his pillow a strange leather book. It was the size of any normal book you would find, but its pages seemed to be made of a weird cloth that was bound by brown withered leather. A string hung from the spine, tied to a medallion. On the front of this book was weird distorted text and a strange symbol.
It took some time to obtain this beautiful piece of art.
Zeke, that thing looks looks demonic.
I know. I had one of my cultic pen pals hunt it down. With the right price, of course. Now there's chapters talking about the book being able to store the souls, which means we can capture him somehow in this book. I haven't quite figured out how to do that, but we can do it and then I can be free.
Franny stepped away from Zeke and faced the glass.
Okay, Franny. This is all a really bad dream. And I'm never waking up.
Franny stopped panicking and turned around and looked at Zeke with a puzzled face.
That book only answered one of my questions. What about the first question? How do you think we are going to do any of that?
You and me escape.
First of all, Zeke, it's you and I. Second, are you actually mad?
Franny, I've been getting all the messages in the gum wrappers. I thought that's what we were gonna do.
What messages?
Zeke pulled out a bunch of foil gum wrappers that had words written on them in blue ink pen. Franny grabbed them out of his hand and began reading them. On every wrapper was a fragment of what appeared to be an escape plan. One read left doorway at the bottom of the stairwell.
Well, Zeke, this certainly is my handwriting. And I was wondering how long it would take for you to figure it all out. Perhaps you're much smarter than I thought.
You really do want to help me, don't you?
Zeke, it's simple. We've both experienced the supernatural and were blamed falsely. I want answers, and you could be the only one that can help me find them. Now, Zeke, it will appear that someone in the facility slipped medication into all the guards' coffee. There's a small window of opportunity, and there's a gold 1999 Buick Century waiting in the parking lot. Would you like to go for a short drive in the park?
Only if we can eat real food. I've had enough chicken strips for the rest of my life.
You have a deal, my friend. Now, this must happen quickly. The kids outside can't see us. Remember, once we do this, there's no going back, only forward. I trust your research will lead us to the truth about this man?
It will, especially with the information in the compendium.
Sounds good to me, Zeke. Now, let's get the hell out of here and catch us a monster.
The escape was swift and surprisingly easy. Franny led Zeke out of his cage. They both glanced down the hall to the day room to be cautious the kids weren't watching, and made their escape towards the stairwell. It didn't take long for them to reach an exit where two security guards sat sleeping in their chairs. Franny carefully swiped her card across the scanner and the door opened. The two stepped out into the outside world, where the sky was filled with clouds.
Alright, Zeke, the car is parked right...
Excuse me, do you have authority to have this patient outside? As far as I'm aware, there were no scheduled passes for today.
A security guard that Franny missed was waiting outside. She began to breathe heavily for a moment, then calmly pulled out a paper.
I have the papers here, signed by Dr. Piela. If you like the call and oppose her, be my guest.
Oh, my bad, Miss Verman. No need to bring her into this. Just make sure you get him to the right place quickly. He's tricky.
Don't tell me how to do my job.
Oh, my apologies, Francisca. I wasn't...
Are we going to talk all day, or are you going to let me transport this patient?
Carry on, then.
Zeke laughed at how clever Franny's escape was. She truly covered all the gray areas. The two raced towards Franny's gold car. On their way, Franny took off her heels. They made it to the doors and unlocked the car. She gave Zeke the signal to get in and she started the engine.
Alright, Zeke, we made it this far. Where to?
Philadelphia. We can start in my hometown and maybe uncover something the cops didn't.
That's about a day's drive, but it could take longer. First, we need to get you new clothes.
Are we criminals now?
Actually, I'm a criminal now. You've been one for some years.
Fair point. Maybe we should leave before they realize we're both missing and you drugged the guards.
Let's hit the road then. Play whatever music you like on the radio, put on your seatbelt, and get comfortable. It's gonna be a long ride.
Franny put the car in reverse and backed out of the parking lot. She drove safe yet swiftly. As the two pulled into traffic, the sirens of the facility went off behind them. They glanced back for a second, but continued to drive off onto the highway, where their journey would begin.
I see you've finally begun your journey. I was wondering how long it would be before you came for me. Well, just know I'm ready for you both, and you have no idea what I have in store for you.
Well, there you have it. The beginning of a journey between two people bound by the paranormal. Do you think Zeke and Franny will be caught? Do they have what it takes to find this strange man? All the answers next week on a new Cryptid Paranormal Investigators. This has been Horror Hour with your host, Matt Roman. I'll see you next week. Good night.